and good evening. It's April 10th, 2025, and welcome to another one of our branches of the vine with another series from those wonderful folks at Aleph Beta. I enjoy the connections across Scripture and the idea of putting ourselves in other shoes, the idea of understanding the characters, sometimes all the characters, because I'm reminded that these were real people with agendas. And here at the Dusty Feet, we often try on sandals for those good and those that are not so good. So this series from Rabbi David Fohrman caught my attention. Could you become Haman? I was intrigued by what I saw. Thought we might want to discuss it. So here we go with, could we become Haman? This is part 5. This is our last one, our wrap up. So let's enjoy it tonight on the Dusty Feet. And before we forget, if you do find these kinds of podcasts useful, just click the subscribe button. Those reminders, they just help you. But also, you think these might be useful to others, that is when you click that like button, because that is how YouTube is going to choose to share these to more people if they wish. So remember, the Scroll of Esther. It's an interesting story. It's one of only 2 scrolls in our collection of Scripture. It never mentions God by name. The other, of course, the Song of Solomon. Still, the story and its history, I think it's well worth our time. So this is now a part 5 series as we explore the history and cultural connections that put us into this story about Esther and this rescue from attempted genocide. We're going to pick up where we left off with episode 4 of his series. Listen to the story that Rabbi Fohrman continues to unveil. I think we're going to enjoy it. Take a listen.
The story of the Megillah now proceeds towards its climax. In the scenes that follow, you will find Esther approaching the king 4 times, each time taking one step closer towards her goal, the salvation of her people. Now, if you follow the Megillah's language as she makes these 4 attempts, you're going to actually find her using this language of Tov and Ra within her entreaties to the king. But not just talking about both Tov and Ra, but talking about it in a certain kind of way, talking about it in the right kind of way. And it's almost like there's a little game that the Megillah is playing with us, a literary game. Can Esther, in imparting this forbidden knowledge to the king, in other words, in this case, her identity, can she string together the words Tov, good, and Ra, evil, such that she actually tells the king something about the nature of Tov and Ra itself, what good and evil actually looks like? In other words, can she talk to him, not just about what he wants to do, but about what he ought to do? Can she use these words, Tov and Ra, in a way that actually helps clarify, rather than obscure, the meaning of these words? If she can successfully do that, she can redeem the original Tree of Knowledge story. She can find a way to give her husband forbidden knowledge, as it were, in a way that conveys accurate knowledge of good and evil, rather than its counterfeit, the self-serving blindness of, if I want it, it must be right. Let's watch Esther try to do this. The first thing she does is she invites the king to a banquet. Listen to her invitation. Im ala melech tov. If it's good for the king, if it pleases the king, what kind of tov is she talking about? Well, obviously she's talking about desire. Im ala melech tov. If you like this, if it's good for you. So what's happening is she's sort of using the word tov, but she hasn't actually gotten to the point where she's actually imparting to the king any moral clarity. So far, she's still just in the world of his desires. So let's continue. After the king comes to the banquet, she says, why don't you come back to another banquet? One more time, she says, Im ala melech tov, if it pleases the king. But still, she's just talking about his desires. And notably, she hasn't mentioned Ra yet, the other side of the equation. It's like the Megillah itself is going out of its way to tell you the task isn't complete. She hasn't really given the knowledge. She hasn't talked to him about her identity yet. She's only halfway there. There's the Tov. What about the Ra? What about the stuff he doesn't want to hear? Keep on going. She does keep on going the next time she meets him. Let's listen into what she says during her next and final banquet with the king. At that last banquet, she begins as she did before. Im ala melech tov, if it pleases the king. Tinatan li nafshi b'shelati, give me my life as my request. V'ami b'vakashati, and give me my people's lives too. She reveals who she is. She gives him the forbidden knowledge. And in fact, if we go back to our little game, she now has both sides of the coin, because she doesn't just talk about the Tov. She talks about Ra too. The word even appears. The king says, "Who is this? Who threatens you?" She points to Haman and says, "Haman hara hazeh," this evil man. She's now talked to him about both good and evil. Seemingly, she's done her job. She's given him the knowledge. She's talked about Tov. She's talked about Ra. What else do you want from her? We can all go home. Except if you read the Megillah carefully, we can't all go home. Even though the king hangs Haman, the decree against the Jews still stands. If the Megillah ends here, the Jews all die. Which means the queen has to approach the king one last time. But now, if you go back to the story of the tree of knowledge, good and evil, you say to yourself, but I don't understand. Hasn't she done everything? I mean, look, she's talked about Tov, she's talked about Ra, she's given the forbidden knowledge, so what more must she do? She hasn't yet really made a moral case before the king. Everything so far has just been a function of his desire. She has to talk to him not just about his desires, but about what's right, and she hasn't yet done that. Because think about everything that she's done. It really all just boils down to what the king wants to do. Remember her words that she repeats over and over again in each of these three audiences. Im ala melech tov, im ala melech tov, im ala melech tov. She always says it. If it pleases the king, if it pleases the king, if it pleases the king. But if she never moves on from there, if it just stays with the king's desires, then it's really all about what he wants to do. That's not a moral argument. As a matter of fact, if I'm the king and I think it's just about what I want to do, so I look at you, Esther, and say, well, if you're asking me to save you, if that's what I want to do, yeah, I love you, I'll save you. You ask me to save your people? Not so much. I don't really love them so much. If it's really, Esther, about what I want to do, you haven't taken me anywhere. This is what I want to do. This is what I don't want to do. All your people will die. That's fine with me. So at this moment, Haman is dead, yes, but the decree against the Jews, that still stands. The Megillah ends here, all the Jews die. So Esther needs to go to the king. Esther needs to make one last appeal, and it can't stop with what he wants to do. It has to end with what's right for him to do. So a few days later, she goes back to the king for one last desperate plea. She begins with his desire, the same way she began before. Vatomer im al hamelech tov, and she says, if it pleases the king. But then she takes a gentle step forward. She makes one more introductory comment to the king, not just im al hamelech tov, if it's pleasing in your eyes, but v'chasher hadavar lifnei hamelech. If the thing seems right, seems fitting before the king, chasher is a much more objective word than tov. It's a word that signifies the other meaning of tov, good and right. It's interesting to note that this is actually the only time in all of the Hebrew Bible that the adjective kasher is ever used. When in Leviticus we talk about kosher food, the word kosher isn't actually used. It's phrased in terms of tameh and tahor, pure or impure. But the modern sense of us talking about something that is kosher, the only source for that idea of kosher as an adjective actually is right here in Tanakh. It's what Esther tells the king right now. It's fitting. So look what she says. If it pleases you, and the thing is fitting, kasher, the queen is beginning to take the king on a journey from his desires, from what he wants to do, to what he ought to do. Let's see how she continues that journey. Well, the next thing she does is she invokes the word tov one more time, but here again she's taking a gentle baby step with him. V'tova ani be'enav. And if I am good in your eyes, if you look upon me and see good, then I have an argument to make to you, king. Eichacha uchal v'ra'iti b'ra'a asher insatami. How can you expect me to stand in this palace, safe and sound, and watch the destruction of my countrymen, watch the evil that would befall my countrymen? There it is. She's using Tov and Ra one more time, but this time in a way that actually begins to make a moral argument. She's leveraging his desire to talk about what's actually right and what's wrong. Her argument goes like this. If I am good in your eyes, if you really love me, then it would be an act of terrible evil to allow someone you love to witness the demise of all of her countrymen. It would be wrong to do that. But the truth is, the moral overtones in her argument even go deeper than this. Because go back to those loaded words, Im tova ani be'einav, if I am good in your eyes, and ask what those words really mean now. You see, in the past, they might have meant, if I please you, tov, just in terms of, you desire me. But that was before he knew who she really was. Now he knows. And think to yourself, what has she revealed to him? The greatest reason why he should hate her. She's from the vermin, people that were supposed to be exterminated by his Secretary of State. You know, it was one thing to love her when she was an anonymous girl and when he could pretend that she was anyone. But once she reveals the truth, I'm from the lowest of the low, the dregs of society. And now look me in the eye, King. Do you still love me? If you look at me, v'tova ani be'einav, and I am still good in your eyes, if you still care for me, as indeed you must, because you killed Haman and you preserved me, then I am going to extend this argument and use it to have you recognize not just my humanity, but the humanity of my people. In effect, she's really taking him to the following place. If you've accepted my identity, if it is my humanity that you are willing to accept, despite my being one of them, then whether you like it or not, you have to tolerate and accept them as basic human beings too. You have to keep them alive. Save my people. It's at that moment that Esther finally redeems the story of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. She has found a way to convey forbidden knowledge, dangerous knowledge, knowledge that by rights should kill her, to her husband, and has found a way to bring moral clarity to his vision. I mentioned to you before that the story of the Megillah can be seen as a kind of battle between two ways of replaying the Tree of Knowledge story. We've taken some time now to understand the dynamics between Esther and Achashverosh, how Esther seems to redeem the original Tree of Knowledge story. To complete our view of the magnificence of what she does, we need to go back one last time to the failed Tree of Knowledge replay, to the story of Zeresh and Haman, and in the contrast between the failure and the success, we will find something surprising. We will find the key to the power of love. Okay, having looked at Zeresh and Haman on the one hand as one kind of failed expression of the Tree of Knowledge story, and having looked at Esther's interactions with the king on the other hand as a sort of successful replay of the Tree of Knowledge story, I think one of the surprising things that emerges from this is the role of love as a potential moral force, as a force for good. But in order for love to be that force for good, it requires a little backbone. Sometimes, almost paradoxically, it requires standing up to the one that you love and demanding something different from him or her than what they think they want. Let's go back to Esther and the king for a minute. As we spoke about in our last video, what she's really doing is starting with the king's desire, but then taking him to somewhere that he may actually not want to go on his own. She makes that journey from good in terms of desire to good in terms of what's right to do. She makes a moral argument to him. And Zeresh never makes that journey. She starts with what Haman wants to do and ends with what Haman wants to do. Oh, so you don't like everything in your life and the one thing that you're missing is Mordechai? You want to kill him? Sure. Why don't you do that? Why don't you kill him? That way you'll go to the king's feast and you'll be so happy. She's trying to make him happy. The tragedy of Zeresh is that she thinks she's doing the right thing for him. She's trying to help him facilitate his desires. What more could someone want from their spouse than someone who would just fulfill every desire they could possibly have? So she says, go make the tree. She starts with his desires and ends with his desires. And if that's all you do, you're not really much of a spouse at all. The original role of a spouse, as defined way back in the Garden of Eden, was to be an ezer kenegdo, somebody who could help them, but also somebody who could oppose them. The word ezer kenegdo means to help and to oppose, and sometimes the way you help most is by opposing. Sometimes I have to stand up and say no. The way I'm going to make you happy, actually, is by not just catering to your desires, but helping you place those desires in context, helping you to see what's right. But now ask yourself this, a little bit of a deeper question. How do you help a spouse see what's right? Even as I say those words, isn't there a part of you that your flesh is kind of crawling? You're saying, one second, I don't want my spouse to teach me moral lessons. I don't want my spouse to preach at me. I'd be enraged if they tell me what's right and wrong. I want them to love me for who I am. Here's the amazing thing. Those two things, what's right and loving someone for who they really are, at a very deep level, those two things are very intertwined. Loving someone for who they are is actually the greatest moral truth you can ever impart to your spouse. It's true for Zeresh and Haman, and it's also true for Esther and the king. Let's see why. Let's go to Zeresh and Haman. What's the greatest gift that Zeresh could have given Haman, her husband, at that moment that he came home so devastated? I have everything, he tells her. I have riches. I have children. I have power. But none of it means anything to me. All I want is the one thing I can't have, he tells her. All I want is Mordecai dead. What gift could she have given him in that moment? You know what she could have said? She could have said, look at you. You're not valuing yourself for who you are. Why do you think you don't like anything that you have? Is it a coincidence that every last thing that you have you don't like? You know, you think you don't like the Jews. You know who you don't like even more than the Jews? You hate yourself. It's because you hate yourself that you hate every last thing that you have. And if you had the one thing that you don't have, you'd hate that too. Stop thinking about your desires. What you really need to do is start liking what you have. Maybe if you start liking what you have, you'll start liking you. If you don't believe that, just look at me. I don't need you to have the one thing that you don't have in order to like you. I love you for who you are. If that's enough for me, can it be enough for you? Had she been able to give that gift to him, it would have been the first stepping stone to break out of the prison of desire and to be able to see the other meaning of good, what is right, what is true, what is noble. It would have saved Mordecai's life, and in the end, it might have saved her husband's life too. In a deep way, Esther was just doing the inverse of this with the king. Zeresh could have accepted Haman for who he was. Esther demands of the king that he accept her for who she really is. Esther's argument is, it's not enough that you love me as an anonymous person. Why don't you find out who I really am, where I really come from? Can you still love me then? Can you accept me then? When he does, she wins her first battle, but then she leverages that love even further. It's not enough for you to accept just me. I need you to accept the existence of my countrymen too. You can't stop with recognizing just my own humanity. If I'm a human and I am from them, then they are human too, aren't they? So all told, in the Megillah we see, just underneath the surface, two competing ways of replaying the story of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's almost as if the tree of knowledge of good and evil kind of splits in two. One way of replaying the story is to give your spouse the one thing that he doesn't have yet, to cater to his every desire, and in so doing, to destroy him. That's Zeresh and Haman, the failed replay of the tree of knowledge. The other way is to provide forbidden knowledge, knowledge that might seem dangerous, but that is actually essential, knowledge about who you really are, and to ask that your spouse accept you for that, Esther does this and takes the king on a journey from what you might have thought you wanted to what is right and good. In the end, Esther is the heroine of the Megillah, but her actions might be significant not just locally for the many hundreds of thousands that she saved, but even more globally, perhaps, on the macro-historical scale. For right here, at the very end of the Hebrew Bible, someone is finally put to rest, a terrible crime that has haunted mankind ever since the enchanting, confusing fruit of the tree of knowledge first beckoned it to us. Hey everybody, I hope that you enjoyed this course we made here almost as much as we enjoyed producing it. If you're interested in more on Purim, I wrote a book about Purim themes. It's entitled The Queen You Thought You Knew. You can find it using the link below, or you can get it at your local Judaic bookstore.
Okay. Knowledge, information, advice, perspective. I guess it's one of a fun challenge of deciding how to share that said information and maybe how to approach those with whom we share that information. Do we respect those who shared information to us? Do we disrespect those who share that information? Do we care? Does it matter how they presented said information? Because I think it's a big part of how the story of Esther plays out, at least in my way of thinking. We have information that needs to be discussed at that time, so it needs to be put out there. But how we do it in a way that, for lack of a better term, because I'm not sure if it fits here, but let's try it, see if it works. A win-win situation. Can I approach you in a way that honors you, respects you, gives you what you need to make a choice? I do it to ensure the information is given to you with the right intent, right? Hopefully my right heart. I can only speak for how I'm putting it out there. But then, can I then sit back and then let you make that choice? I expect to have given you what you need, probably more than what you want, and yet still respect your part in the process. There's a practical reality for her, because for her, she can live or not with his choice. But one of the challenges here, I like how the rabbi puts it, is that she's giving him the information that he needs to make his choice, but she's not forcing his hand. She's not disrespecting who he is, or she's painting him in a corner that forces him to act in a certain way. She approaches him like Skip Moen and Rabbi David Fohrman have said, like an Ezer Kenegdo. This is her part of that interaction. I had a different thought come to me. Maybe you could think of it as an upside down thought. But it came to me as how I view the information, right? And this is the terminology that mentions forbidden knowledge and how that kind of information is looked at. What I mean is we're looking at it merely for its value to ourselves, right? Or maybe can we look at beyond that? Consider its value to others, how it affects someone other than just ourselves. Because Esther could have said her piece, and as the rabbi mentioned, it probably would have kept her alive, but maybe not the rest. So can our plea be not as much about ourselves, but is it possible when we share said information that maybe even take me instead of them? That's an interesting upside down thought. Can that information you're imparting say you're going to say it like you're not expecting it, right? Maybe some of you are thinking the phrase, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. I guess meaning how that information and how it has an impact. In this particular case with Esther, it does go on that's what Mordecai's plea is to Esther, that this does go beyond you. That's why it's essential. Forbidden. Esther realizes that, and then she figures out how she's going to approach the king. So Fohrman uses a term, self-serving blindness. It's an interesting thought, that I'm going to look at it from my perspective, how I'm going to benefit, not how this can benefit more than just me. Even if I don't benefit in the beginning, sometimes even not at all. And just take that quick little turn. Even the rabbi took it. I expect you caught it. That adjective, adverb, verb, kosher, right? Where we get kosher from. Doing what's fitting towards the right thing to do. Because it's interesting when you think about it. Because the rabbi's right. The instructions in Torah, they talk about it as pure and impure. What's good for you food. This is not good for you food. This is the stuff I want you to eat. This is stuff I don't want you to eat. And yet we use the term kosher. Seems to run along that fitting line, right? But it really is more about what is right. It's not my desire. It's God's choice. Because it's an interesting thought. We can take things, we can go places, we can hear the word kosher. And we hear kosher, it draws a culinary picture in our heads, right? But when we have it here, used in this only time in Scripture, the culinary vision is not there at all. It's just the right thing to do. So maybe it is appropriate when we say, dude, that was not kosher. We're not talking about what they ate. They're telling me what I did wasn't right. Wasn't fitting. I thought that was interesting. Made me think about how we tend to use terms in Bibles occasionally. Just jump from the expectations of words to the expectation of actions. And then how we use them today, yeah? Okay. Do we recognize the value of humanity? The rabbi asks us, as Esther asked the king, about the value of a person. But with that person, they're extending themselves. They're saying they are part of me. You know, it's very different from us in our culture today, right? We're very much in a me, my culture. We even have a weird ad campaign we got from one of our armed forces. We get this army of one. Yet in Scripture, we see a very different story. It's all about association. It's all about connection, community. I am part of the community. Yes, I want to be accepted for who I am, but part of that value, part of that identity, part of whom I am, please look at me as part of a community. You know, in today's vernacular, we'd say we're the body of Messiah, right? In the common Greek word, it would be the body of Christ, right? But we know that Christos is Greek for Messiah, so really we're all body of Messiah. So do you value me not only for who I am, but also for the people who are part of the body of Messiah? I mean, in this passionate plea, can I ask you to value them as the body of Messiah as much as me? I know I just really stretched it, because Esther's thought, I tend to agree, still something might be worth discussing amongst ourselves, is how do we look at those around us? Not only us, but maybe us to them to us. And then with that knowledge, how do I share that? How do I help you understand that? How do we grow together with that? It's interesting to think, especially when you're in a marriage relationship, looking at your spouse, trying to see her as this Azer Kenegdo. And in that role, she decides to stand up. She needs to say that maybe something you desire isn't healthy for you or for anybody else. She needs to impart that knowledge to you. How do you take that from your spouse? How do you take that from anybody? But our spouse is supposed to be in that role. I become more and more compelled that I just don't stop to listen to her. I mean, maybe she does. She has to stop and tell me. Maybe can I get better? I can get to a point where I stop and I ask her, can you help guide me with this? Can you give me your discernment about what God's telling you about this or that? Because it's funny when they talk about the interconnection, at least from my childhood, right? Funny enough, the picture that I get from the interconnection, it's from a Dr. Dolittle story. That's what pops in my head. I know that's strange. I'm not sure if you know anything about that story. I don't think anything about it. You can probably Google it. And I picture the push me pull you. You Google it, find out what that picture looks like. Because to me, it looks like a llama with one head pointing one way and one head pointing the other way. My interconnection, my helper, is supposed to support and caution me. It's like a picture of me walking off a cliff. She stops, pushes back, and says, hey, do you really want to do this? Is this really where you want to go? Interesting way to see it from when I'm walking. I mean, you're supposed to follow me off. You're supposed to go wherever we go. Doggone it, you're supposed to listen to me. You're supposed to go with me. But that's not the role that God created our spouses to be. Hopefully, we try. Trust me, try is the key word here because I failed much more in my life than I have in succeeding anyways, listening to my helpmate, letting her not only be that role, the interconnection, but also feel comfortable to flourish in that role, to feel uninhibited to listen to God, to give me guidance, support, even help when I need it. It's interesting to consider loving somebody for who they are and what that might entail when you really think about it. So I want us to consider maybe a difference between that. This is going to be a perception thing. It's going to be different for everybody. How do you think this will be different for each person? But here's my thought. When you accept, support somebody for who they are, is it for somebody who they see themselves to be? Rather than maybe who they are as God sees them for who they are. Maybe even who they could be. I think it does ask the question, is how God views them actually more real than even how they view themselves? Because then in that support role, we can say, I love you for who you are. And I'm also aware that I love you for whom God sees you for who you are. And I want to embrace, support, help that perspective of you. That's how I want to view. That's how I want to help. That's how I want to support you. It's in who you are as a person. So maybe that perspective isn't from the lens we have, right? Because ours is cracked, dirty, scratched, an old prescription, rather than maybe our Messiah's fresh, new eyes. It's a different way to look at loving and supporting someone, not only as an individual, but also as a community member. Something to think about. So in the description below includes a link to Skip Moen's Guardian Angel, which discusses the interconnection, her role in the garden, at least as Skip sees it, and how he teaches it. I think it's very well worth a read and or listen. It's not that thick, but its value is understated. So you have the opportunity to look it up, check it out. Oh, and yeah, queen you thought you knew. See, it's not that thick a book. Also, I think it's well worth a read. So thanks again for joining us tonight as we wrap up the scroll of Esther. And our discussion that we've had is, can we become Haman? We need to be careful. Those sandals sometimes get too comfortable. So thank you, Rabbi David Fohrman, and those folks at Aleph Beta with all my heart, with the Dusty Feet.